It was a normal day in the corporate building, bustling with people moving from one floor to another, phones ringing, and the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallways. On the 17th floor, the CEO's daughter, Emily, stepped into the elevator, her face tired from the long day of meetings. She pressed the button for the ground floor, leaning against the smooth walls as the elevator began its descent. But suddenly, there was a strange noise, a sharp screeching sound that made her jump. The elevator jerked violently, and the lights flickered before going completely dark. A feeling of dread settled in her chest. The elevator was no longer moving smoothly. It was stuck, and something was wrong. She pressed the emergency button, but no response came. Her heart raced, her hands trembling as she tried to call for help on her phone. But the signal was dead. Then, without warning, flames erupted from the ceiling. The heat was unbearable, quickly filling the small, metal box with thick smoke. Emily's eyes widened in terror as the flames spread rapidly, crawling down the walls, licking the edges of the elevator door. The heat was overwhelming, and the suffocating smoke made it difficult to breathe. She gasped for air, panic setting in as the flames crept closer to her. She screamed for help, but her voice was lost in the chaos. She was trapped, no way out, no one around. The fire was rising higher, and she knew it was only a matter of time before it would consume her. Her thoughts flashed through her mind in a blur: her family, her future, the life she had barely begun to live. The elevator seemed to shrink with every passing second, the flames a wall that she couldn't escape. Then, just as Emily thought there was no hope, she heard a loud crash, followed by the sound of footsteps. A man, rushing toward her, appeared at the glass door. It was a single dad, a stranger to her. He was there, seemingly out of nowhere, and without hesitation. He slammed his body against the elevator door. With a determined look in his eyes, he punched through the glass, shards flying everywhere. The heat was almost unbearable, but he didn't stop. His hands were burning, but he forced the glass to break, the flames licking at his skin. With every ounce of strength, he managed to reach through the broken glass and pull Emily to safety. She didn't even have time to thank him before he collapsed in pain, his hands scorched, his face pale from the heat. The man was barely able to stand as he looked back at the elevator, now engulfed in flames. The emergency crew arrived just in time to pull them both away. From the danger, the last thing Emily saw was the man's burned hands, trembling as he was carried away on a stretcher. He had risked everything to save her, a complete stranger. The fire had taken so much, but it had also given her a second chance at life. As she lay in the safety of the ambulance, she couldn't stop thinking about the man who had saved her, a hero without recognition, and the pain he had endured to rescue her. The suspense was only beginning. Little did Emily know, her story with this mysterious stranger was far from over. The days after the rescue were a blur for Emily. She was discharged from the hospital with minor burns, but the trauma of the fire haunted her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flames, the smoke, and the man, his hands burning as he reached in to pull her out. She owed him everything, yet she had no idea who he was, or why he had risked his life for someone he'd never met. It bothered her, the mystery of it all. The media was quick to focus on her, the CEO's daughter, the survivor of the horrific elevator blaze. Reporters called her a hero, commending her strength for surviving. But no one mentioned the man who had actually saved her life. It was as if his actions had been erased, overshadowed by the story of her survival. She sat in her apartment, staring at the headlines online, her thoughts swirling. In the quiet of the night, Emily decided she couldn't just move on. She needed to know who this man was and what drove him to risk everything for her. The more she thought about it, the more she felt guilty. She had barely spoken to him, never thanked him properly. All she knew was that he was a single father, just someone passing through the building when fate had thrown them together. In that burning elevator, she began digging for answers. She contacted the building's security, the emergency responders, and anyone who might have known the man. After some time, a name surfaced: Jack Bennett. He had been in the building that day, applying for a job in the lobby. Just an ordinary man with an ordinary life, until the fire had changed everything. He wasn't a hero to the world, but he was a hero to her. Emily felt a sudden urge to find him. She couldn't just sit back anymore. She knew she had to thank him, but there was something deeper at play. There was an undeniable pull, an urge to connect with him, to understand why he had done what he did. She managed to track down his address and decided to visit him. When she arrived at his modest apartment, she hesitated at the door. She wasn't sure what to expect or what she would say. But the moment the door opened and she saw him standing there, his hands still wrapped in bandages, his face tired, yet kind, she knew this was no coincidence. He looked at her with a mix of surprise and caution. "I thought you might be someone from the hospital," he said, his voice gruff but warm. Emily's heart raced. I wanted to thank you," she said, her words feeling inadequate. "For saving me. For everything." Jack stood silently for a moment, as if processing the words. Finally, he stepped aside, allowing her to enter. As she walked in, Emily noticed the small details, photos of his kids on the walls, a worn-out sofa, a place that looked both lived in and lived through. She had expected a grand display of wealth or gratitude, but instead, she found a man who was just like any other. His sacrifice had been pure, without expectation. They sat down, and as they spoke, the weight of what had happened seemed to settle between them. Jack didn't want praise. He simply wanted to move on, to heal, to return to the quiet life he'd known before the fire. But Emily couldn't let that happen. There was something in the way he acted, something that didn't add up. Why hadn't he told anyone about his actions? Why was he hiding from the recognition he so deeply deserved? She couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were connected now in a way that neither of them fully understood. The question that lingered in her mind was simple yet impossible. What had driven Jack to put everything on the line for her? Days passed, and Emily found herself thinking about Jack constantly. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face's quiet strength, the pain in his eyes when she thanked him. There was something hauntingly familiar about him, something she couldn't shake off. It wasn't just his act of heroism. It was as though their fates were intertwined in ways that went beyond a simple rescue. She had to know more, even if it meant digging into parts of his life he was clearly trying to hide. Determined, Emily started visiting Jack's neighborhood more often, driving by his apartment, trying to figure out what made him tick. Each time, she saw him from afar, walking his children to school, carrying grocery bags, living a life that seemed so ordinary yet, in a strange way, perfect. It was as if the man who had faced the fire for her was just another regular guy, with a family, with struggles, with dreams. She couldn't fathom how someone like him could disappear into the background of her life so easily, while her own world remained in the spotlight, every move scrutinized by the public eye. One morning, unable to wait any longer, she found herself standing at his door once again. This time, she wasn't just there to thank him. She had questions she couldn't ignore any longer. When he opened the door, he looked surprised but not unwelcoming. It was as if he knew she was coming, like some invisible thread had pulled them together again. "Emily," Jack greeted, his voice calm but filled with uncertainty. "Is everything okay? I just need to understand," she said, her words rushing out. "Why did you do it? Why did you risk everything for me? We barely knew each other. You didn't even know my name." Jack's eyes flickered with a hint of pain, but he quickly masked it. He stepped aside to let her in, but this time, there was something different in the air, a tension, as if something unspoken hung between them. Emily entered, but before she could say anything else, Jack spoke. "I didn't do it for you, Emily," he said softly. "I did it for someone else, for something else. It wasn't just about saving a life that day. It was about something bigger, but I can't explain it to you." "Not yet." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She had expected answers, but this only opened up more questions. What did he mean? What was he hiding? "Jack," she said, her voice shaking, "what are you not telling me? I know there's more to this, and I can feel it. You're not just a man who saved a life. You're someone with a story, a reason. Please, let me help." Jack's gaze softened, and for a moment, he seemed like he was about to say something. But then his expression hardened again. He stepped back, his hands clenched tightly into fists, the bandages still visible. "You're right," he admitted, his voice rough. "There's more to this, but I can't drag you into it. You don't know what's at stake." Emily felt a cold chill run down her spine. His words sent a shiver of realization through her. This wasn't just about the elevator fire anymore. This was something much deeper, something that could pull her into a world of danger and deception. "What do you mean, Jack?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's at stake?" Before he could answer, the door behind them suddenly slammed open, and in stepped someone Emily didn't recognize. A tall, dark figure, with eyes that seemed to pierce through her. His presence was commanding, unsettling. Jack's face immediately shifted from concern to fear. Emily felt her heart stop. "Jack," the stranger said in a cold, steady voice. "It's time." Emily turned to Jack, her mind racing. Who was this person? And why was Jack suddenly so afraid? Something was happening that she wasn't ready for. And before she could even process the gravity of the situation, Jack made a choice. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. "We're leaving." "Now," Jack ordered, his voice urgent. Before Emily could even ask what was going on, she felt herself being pulled into a whirlwind, unsure of what was real and what wasn't, and terrified that she was now part of a story much bigger than she could have ever imagined. The air outside was thick with tension, and as Emily and Jack hurried through the dimly lit hallways, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Jack's grip on her hand tightened, and he moved with a sense of urgency that felt both protective and panicked. Emily's mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. Who was the man who had barged into Jack's apartment? And why was Jack so afraid? They reached the parking lot in record time, with Jack looking over his shoulder every few seconds, scanning their surroundings. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as they slipped into Jack's old, battered car, its engine sputtering to life. There was no conversation, only the sound of tires screeching on the pavement as Jack sped down the street. Emily barely had time to adjust her seatbelt before they were on the road, weaving through traffic, taking sharp turns that seemed designed to lose anyone who might be following. But despite the speed, the silence between them was deafening. Emily wanted to ask him what was going on, why they were running, but she didn't dare. She could see the strain on Jack's face, the dark circles under his eyes, the tightness in his jaw. Whatever this was, whatever danger they were in, it was something far beyond her understanding. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack spoke, his voice hoarse. "I never wanted to drag you into this, Emily, but I don't have a choice anymore. You're involved now." Emily turned to him, her eyes wide with confusion. "Involved in what? What is this about? Who was that man?" Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white. He didn't answer immediately, his mind clearly elsewhere. The streets outside blurred by, the familiar buildings now feeling unfamiliar, as though they were driving through some kind of nightmare. "They're not just after me, Emily. They've been watching you too. The fire in the elevator. It wasn't random. They set it up. They wanted me to rescue you." His words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. "Who, why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jack let out a sharp breath, eyes focused on the road ahead. "The company I used to work for. They've been into things they shouldn't be, things I couldn't ignore anymore. I tried to get out, but they don't let you leave. Not unless they want you gone for good." Emily's mind was reeling. "You used to work for them? What kind of company is this?" "It's not just a company," Jack said, his voice strained. "It's a front. They've got their hands in everything: illegal arms deals, smuggling, human trafficking. The list goes on. I found out too much, and when I tried to walk away, they came after me, after my family. I thought I could keep you out of it, but when that elevator went up in flames, they knew I couldn't just let you die. You're a part of their plan." Emily's stomach dropped. She could barely breathe, the weight of Jack's words sinking in. Everything she had thought she knew about the world, the safety, the security was crumbling before her eyes. She wasn't just a bystander in this story. She was a pawn, someone caught in the web of a sinister game she didn't understand. Jack glanced over at her, his face full of regret. "I should have told you sooner. I should have kept you out of this, but now we're both in danger. They won't stop until they get what they want, and I don't know how far they'll go to make sure that happens." Emily couldn't even process everything Jack was saying. The reality of the situation felt like a blur, everything spinning out of control. They were being hunted. She was being hunted. And for the first time in her life, Emily realized that there were no safe places anymore. No guarantees of peace. As they continued down the empty, winding roads, the dark sky above felt more like a trap than ever before. There was no turning back now. What started as a simple rescue had turned into something far more dangerous. And Emily couldn't help but wonder, was she strong enough to survive the storm that was coming? The drive continued, and with each passing minute, the weight of their situation pressed harder on Emily's chest. The city's skyline had long faded behind them, and now they were headed into the outskirts, where the streets became more deserted, less familiar. Jack's hands were still gripping the wheel, knuckles pale, and his eyes never left the road. It was as if he were trying to outrun something, and Emily had no doubt he was. But what exactly were they running from? What happens now? She asked, her voice breaking through the silence. Jack didn't answer right away. The car hummed beneath them, the only sound in the darkened world outside. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and serious. Now, we find out who's really behind this, and we make sure they can't hurt anyone else. Emily's heart beat faster. And what about me? What's my role in this? I don't even understand what I'm involved in. I'm just trying to survive. Jack glanced at her for a split second, his face a mix of exhaustion and resolve. You're more than just a survivor, Emily. You're part of something bigger now. You've seen too much, and because of that, they'll come after you just like they're coming after me. Emily tried to process his words, but it all felt too much, too soon. The strange, unsettling man who had shown up at Jack's apartment, the way they had fled in a rush, everything had escalated too quickly. She hadn't asked for any of this, but somehow, she had been pulled into a world that wasn't hers to understand. Who are they? Emily finally asked, her voice full of uncertainty. They're a group that controls everything from the shadows, Jack answered, his tone heavy. Corporate elites who pull strings in politics, law enforcement, even the military. They've been manipulating things for years, and when I got too close to the truth, I became a target. Emily's mind was reeling. She had heard of powerful, untouchable people before, but she had never imagined they would be so close to her life. She had thought of her world as safe, her only concern being her career, her future. But now, that world seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a nightmare she couldn't wake from. As they continued their drive, Jack's eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror. It wasn't just paranoia, he was being hunted, and Emily was an unwitting part of the chase. The thought made her stomach twist. Are they still following us? Emily asked, trying to see behind them, but the darkness of the night made it impossible to tell. I'm not sure, Jack muttered, but I can't take any chances. They took a sharp turn onto an even more desolate road, and Jack slowed the car as they approached a rundown building. Emily stared at the structure in confusion. It looked like an old, abandoned warehouse far from any place she'd expect to be safe. This is where we'll lay low for a while, Jack said, pulling into the lot. There's a network of people who want to stop them. I've been in touch with them before, but I didn't think it would get this bad. Emily's mind raced. Are you sure we can trust them? Jack didn't answer right away. He parked the car and turned off the engine. I'm not sure about anything anymore, Emily. But right now, there are only hope. As they stepped out of the car, the cool night air hit Emily like a slap. The silence around them felt suffocating, and for the first time, she realized how isolated they were. There was no turning back. They were in the middle of something dangerous, and there was no telling how far it would go. Jack led her toward the warehouse, his every step deliberate. As Emily followed him, she felt a surge of fear mixed with adrenaline. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore, it was a fight for the truth, for justice, for the chance to take down the hidden powers controlling everything. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a trap. Something didn't feel right, and the deeper they went, the more she sensed it. But there was no way out now. Whatever happened next, they were in it together, and Emily realized, in that moment, that this wasn't just Jack's fight anymore. It was hers, too. The door creaked open as they entered the warehouse, the air inside thick with dust and the faint smell of old wood and metal. Jack's footsteps echoed off the concrete floor, and Emily followed closely behind, her eyes scanning the shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. and every noise seemed amplified in the eerie silence. "Stay close," Jack whispered, his voice low and steady. Emily nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was the danger they were in or the uncertainty of everything around her, but the atmosphere inside the warehouse felt suffocating. They walked deeper into the building, passing rows of crates and old machinery. There was an unsettling sense of stillness here, as if time had forgotten this place. Yet, at the same time, there was a quiet intensity in the air, like something was about to happen. Jack led her to a small room at the back, its door already cracked open. Inside, a group of people sat around a table, their faces grim and focused. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she took in their serious expressions. They weren't the kind of people she was used to, not the corporate types she'd rubbed shoulders with. These people had the look of fighters, battle-worn, determined. She wasn't sure who they were or how Jack knew them, but the moment she stepped inside, all eyes turned to her. There was no judgment in their gazes, only the shared understanding of the danger they were all facing. Jack turned to Emily. "These are the people I've been in contact with. They're the ones who've been trying to stop them. They've been waiting for me to return with the information I've gathered." Emily didn't know what to think. She was out of her depth. She had never imagined she'd be in a room like this, surrounded by people who lived in the shadows of society, fighting against something much larger than herself. But looking at them now, she could see the same determination in their eyes that had driven Jack to rescue her. One of the men at the table, a tall figure with a scar running down his cheek, stood up. He locked eyes with Emily, his gaze intense, but not unfriendly. "You're the reason he's here, aren't you?" he asked, his voice calm but with an edge of suspicion. Emily swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't know what Jack was involved in." Her voice trailed off, her words feeling small in the face of the situation. "We know," the man said, his tone softening slightly, "but that doesn't change the fact that you're in this now, and we need to figure out what comes next." Jack looked at her, then back at the group, his expression hardening. "They know about her. They've been tracking her since the fire. We can't wait any longer." A chill ran down Emily's spine as the weight of their words sank in. It wasn't just her life at risk anymore. She had been thrust into something far bigger than she could have imagined, a battle against a hidden, dangerous force. And now, it seemed, there was no way to back out. The tall man with the scar stepped closer to her. "You need to understand something, Emily. This isn't just about surviving anymore. It's about fighting back. We can't let them control everything." "Not anymore," Emily nodded, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't know what this fight would look like or how far it would go. But one thing was clear, she was in the middle of it now, and there was no turning back. The room grew heavy with silence as the weight of the man's words settled over Emily. She felt her heart race, her breath quickening as she tried to process what was happening. Her mind whirled with 1,000 thoughts: fear, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. She had been thrust into this fight, this web of danger and deceit, without any choice, and now, there was no turning back. The man with the scar stood at the head of the table, his gaze fixed on her. "You're not just a survivor anymore, Emily. You're part of this resistance. You've seen too much, and now you have a choice. Help us bring them down, or let them destroy everything you know." Emily's mind flashed back to the elevator fire, to the moment when Jack had pulled her from the flames. She had thought that was the end of it, that she would go back to her life, safe and untouched. But now, she understood that the fire had only been the beginning. She was caught in the eye of a storm, and no matter how much she wanted to walk away, she knew she could in single quotes T. Jack, standing beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. His grip was firm, comforting, but there was a quiet desperation in his eyes. "You don't have to do this, but if we don't act, they'll keep going. They'll hurt more people, and they'll never stop." Emily swallowed hard. She had never been the type to fight. She had always lived in the safety of her own world, sheltered from the ugly truths of life. But now, everything had changed. She couldn't ignore what she had seen. The lives that had been torn apart by the shadowy organization that had taken so much from her already. She couldn't sit back and pretend it wasn't happening. "Iman," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. The words echoed in the quiet room, a commitment to something she never thought she'd be part of. She had no idea what this would lead to, what she would have to face. But one thing was clear, she wasn't going to let them win. The group of resistance fighters looked at her, some with nods of approval, others with skepticism. But there was a sense of understanding between them all. This wasn't a choice any of them had made willingly. They had all been dragged into this war, and now Emily was a part of it. Jack's expression softened, his tension easing slightly. We're not alone in this. We've got the resources, the people who've been fighting for years. Together, we can take them down. As the plans began to form, Emily realized that her life would never be the same. The world she had known was gone, replaced by one filled with danger, deception, and a fight for justice that seemed impossible. But she wasn't going to back down. She couldn't. The battle was just beginning, and Emily was ready to face it head-on, no matter what it took.